The nightmare came just before the rain. Jack Callahan jerked upright in his sweat-drenched bed, chest heaving, breath caught halfway between a scream and a choke. The room was pitch black except for the dull orange pulse of the fire dying in the wood stove. But in his mind, the world was burning. The echo of gunfire still rang in his ears. Sand. Smoke. The small, shaking hands of a girl he hadn't been able to pull from the rubble. Gone again. Always gone. His hand instinctively reached for the Beretta M9 under his pillow, a habit that hadn't dulled since the day he left Kabul. He didn't need it now. The war was over. The enemy was dead or dust. But the ghosts, those came home with him. Rain tapped against the tin roof like distant drums, steady and unrelenting. He sat in silence, staring at nothing, jaw clenched hard enough to ache. A low whine broke through the dark. Ranger, the German shepherd, was already standing at the bedroom door, amber eyes fixed on his handler with alert intensity. Ears perked, tail stiff, muscles taut. "You too, huh?" Jack muttered, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His voice was gravel and regret. Ranger padded closer, nudged Jack's hand with his nose. The bond between them was something forged in sweat, blood, and silence. Something unspoken and absolute. Ranger was his only constant, his only witness. Jack stood and pulled on his flannel shirt, jeans, and boots. The air inside the cabin was cold, damp, heavy with the smell of wet pine and smoke. Outside, the Oregon dawn was still miles away, but sleep wouldn't return. It never did. He poured himself coffee from the pot he'd left on the stove, black and bitter. Ranger waited near the door, head tilted. "All right," Jack sighed. "Let's check the line." They stepped out into the misty gray that wrapped around Granite Falls like a secret. His 15-acre plot sat just west of the old timber mill, nestled between dense forest and rising hills, hemmed in by fog and silence. No neighbors, no noise, no damn pity. Exactly how he liked it. The trail behind the cabin was soaked and slick with runoff. The trees dripped. A heavy fog clung to the ground like smoke that had forgotten how to rise. Jack walked ahead with the easy stride of a man trained to move through hostile territory. Ranger ranged beside him, never more than a few feet away. Jack's mind was still trapped in the folds of his nightmare. The girl, her eyes, her hand reaching. Ranger froze, stopped mid-step, ears forward, nose twitching. Jack followed his gaze. "What is it, boy?" Ranger didn't answer. He moved slowly, body low, then suddenly lunged off the trail into the underbrush, toward the base of a massive ancient oak tree whose roots curled like twisted fingers out of the mud. "Ranger, heel!" The command cracked like a whip. Ranger didn't flinch, didn't pause. He barked, a deep, visceral sound, and began digging furiously at the wet ground beneath the tree, sending moss and dirt flying. Jack stalked after him, boots slipping on the slick slope. "I said heel." Still nothing. Ranger clawed deeper, more frantic now. His hackles were raised. His entire body shook with tension. "God damn it, Ranger!" Jack grabbed his collar and yanked. The dog snarled, not at Jack, but at the earth. He turned his head briefly, eyes wild, then barked again and resumed digging. Jack's heart thudded once. Hard. This wasn't normal, not for Ranger. This was a dog who'd sniffed out IEDs buried beneath inches of sand. A dog trained not just for scent, but for discipline. He had never disobeyed Jack. Never. Not until now. Jack knelt down, brushing aside some of the loose earth. Then he saw it. A flash of rusted metal. He scraped more dirt away with his gloved hands. At first he thought it was a pipe, maybe a forgotten fence post. But then he saw the shape, a thick iron chain, almost 2 inches wide, looped through the roots like some ancient snare. What the hell? The chain was old, very old. The links were coated in rust, pitted deep like they'd been there for decades. Something about the way it curled through the earth made Jack's skin crawl. It hadn't just ended up there. It had been placed, anchored, buried. Ranger stopped digging, panting hard, watching Jack with a look that almost resembled pleading. Jack stood slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. Rainwater trickled down his neck. He stared down at the chain. He didn't know what he was looking at, but he knew one thing. Something was down there. Something someone had wanted to stay buried. He looked at Ranger. "You're sure?" The dog let out a low whine and sat, tail thudding once against the soaked leaves. Jack didn't ask again. They walked back in silence. Jack's hand stayed on the grip of his sidearm the entire way, his eyes sweeping the woods like they used to in the red zones. Back at the cabin, Jack tossed his muddy coat onto the rack and leaned over the kitchen sink, staring out the rain-streaked window toward the dark edge of the woods. He didn't believe in omens, but he believed in instincts, and his were screaming. He looked at the rust-stained dirt still under his fingernails. Tomorrow, he would go back, with a shovel. Some things are buried for a reason. That was the first thought echoing in Jack's mind as he returned to the old oak tree, shovel in hand, boots slicing into the muddy soil with every step. The morning was quiet in that way Oregon mornings often were, silent, soaked in mist, as if the world was holding its breath. Ranger trailed behind him, still limping slightly from yesterday's outburst, but his ears were perked. The dog hadn't forgotten. Neither had Jack. He reached the spot without needing to look. The dirt was still torn from Ranger's digging, and the rusted iron chain curled up like a serpent exposed. Jack set the shovel down beside it and crouched low, pulling on his gloves. He hesitated for just a second, not because he was afraid of what he'd find, but because part of him already knew. He started to dig. The wet ground gave way easily, the roots clinging to whatever lay below. Each stroke of the shovel cut deeper into the mystery. The chain didn't end. It looped, twisted, threaded through the earth like it had been deliberately wound around something. Something meant to stay hidden. After nearly half an hour, Jack struck something solid. Metal. He dropped to his knees and used his hands to brush away the dirt. A corner emerged. Flat, steel, with old military-grade rivets. Then another. It was a box about the size of a footlocker, but not army-issued. Civilian, heavy-duty, industrial. It was bound shut with the same chain that had led him here, padlocked with a thick, rusted bolt that looked fused by time. Jack leaned back, breathing hard. Ranger whined. "Yeah," Jack muttered. "I don't like it either." He pulled a crowbar from his backpack and wedged it beneath the rim. It took 3 tries before the seal cracked open with a groan, a wave of musty, fetid air hitting his face like breath from a grave. He coughed and turned away, then reached in. The first thing he pulled out was a faded leather pouch, soft with age and stained black at the corners. Inside, a silver locket, still intact, tarnished but unmistakably delicate. Engraved initials, barely legible, ED. Next came a sheriff's badge. Not the modern polished brass kind, but an older one, dull and scratched. It bore the emblem of Granite Falls. Nameplate, Sheriff Conroy. Jack stared at it for a long moment, jaw tightening. At the bottom of the box lay a leather-bound journal. Mold had eaten away at parts of the cover, and the pages stuck together in clumps. He handled it with care, sliding it into a plastic bag before sealing the box back up. Thunder grumbled overhead. Ranger's ears twitched, but his eyes were on Jack, searching for cues. Jack stood, staring down at the hole he'd made, the now empty grave. He knew better than to jump to conclusions, but this wasn't just some forgotten relic. This was something someone had buried deliberately, not hidden, erased. He looked down at Ranger. "We just kicked something loose." Back at the cabin, Jack turned the barn into a makeshift lab. The journal needed to dry, slowly, page by page. He set up fans, a dehumidifier, and gently began separating the pages using gloves and tweezers. Some were unreadable, others just barely intact. But one page fell open like it had been waiting. The handwriting was neat, feminine, written in faded blue ink that still cut through the yellowing paper. "My name is Emily Davenport. I'm writing this because I don't know who to trust anymore." Jack read on. Her words spilled across the page in a nervous rhythm, each entry more frantic than the last. Emily had been in love with a boy from a powerful family, no name yet, but there were mentions of expectations, secrets, and Sheriff Conroy promised to help. Then came the line that made Jack freeze. "If anything happens to me, I did not go willingly." His throat tightened. He'd seen those words before, not those exact ones, but the sentiment, in folded letters left behind by young girls in war zones, in scrawled warnings etched into walls of ruined homes. It was a message meant to survive the person who wrote it. Jack leaned back in his chair, the journal resting on the table like a ticking bomb. He knew this town. He knew the way it smiled at strangers and buried its rot behind tall fences and old money. And he knew the name Davenport. It rang through the back of his mind like a loose thread. He went to the filing cabinet in the corner of his study, a relic from when he'd tried working as a private investigator before realizing small towns didn't want their dirty laundry aired. He flipped through manila folders until he found one marked simply, "Disappearance, GF/1985. It was thin, just 2 sheets. A missing persons report filed by a Ruth Davenport, listing her daughter Emily as last seen July 3rd, 1985. The note at the bottom said she'd likely run away with a boyfriend. No investigation, no follow-up, no media coverage. Swept under the rug. Jack stared at the page, then back at the journal. He didn't believe in coincidences. He grabbed his keys and the journal, shoved them into his rucksack, and opened the front door. Rain tapped the porch roof like fingers drumming impatience. Ranger stood waiting, head tilted. "We're going to town," Jack said. "To the one place people never think to hide the truth." Ranger barked once, short and sharp. Jack locked the door behind him. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but he knew where to start. If Emily Davenport had been forgotten, she wouldn't stay that way for long. Not anymore. "If anything happens to me, I did not go willingly." That sentence had looped through Jack Callahan's head since the moment he'd read it, playing like a warning whispered through time, scrawled in fading ink by a girl who knew exactly what kind of storm was coming for her. Emily Davenport. It was her voice in the journal, her secrets buried beneath his tree. And now Jack was chasing ghosts in a town that had gone real quiet about the past. Granite Falls looked the same as always, a string of time-worn buildings, brick and wood, nestled in the mist like they'd been set down and forgotten. But now, it felt different. There was weight in the air, something pressing down on the back of Jack's neck. a feeling he'd learned to trust, one that had kept him alive in places where most men didn't come back whole. He parked his truck near the old post office and walked the 2 blocks to the public library. The bell over the door jingled as he stepped inside. It was warm, filled with the faint smell of old paper and lemon polish. A long counter stretched across the far end. Behind it stood a woman, early 30s, auburn hair pulled back in a braid, a denim jacket over a navy blue sweater. Her eyes flicked up as he approached, scanning him quickly. Not in fear, but in calculation. "You're not from around here," she said. Jack took off his cap. "Born here. Moved back a few years ago." "That explains the face, but not the stare," she replied, closing a book in front of her. "You looking for something?" "Claire Whitmore, right?" Jack asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." He set the plastic-sealed journal down gently on the desk. "You ever hear of Emily Davenport?" Her breath caught, just slightly, but Jack saw it. "I'm guessing you didn't dig that up in your attic," she said slowly. "More like under a tree," he replied. "On my property." She stared at the journal, her expression unreadable. "Why are you asking me?" "Because I heard your grandmother was her best friend. And because this town seems awfully good at forgetting things that should have never been buried." Claire studied him for a long moment. Then she gestured for him to follow her. They moved through a maze of dusty shelves and into a back office filled with filing cabinets and an old microfilm reader. Claire closed the door behind them. "My grandmother Ruth used to tell me bedtime stories about Emily," she said, unlocking one of the cabinets. "Not fairy tales. Real stories about a girl who disappeared and nobody cared enough to look. She said Emily was kind, brave." In love, Jack leaned against the wall. "What happened?" "Officially?" Claire shrugged. "She ran away." "Unofficially?" "She got too close to someone who didn't want to be exposed." She pulled a drawer open and began rifling through old microfiche files. There was a boy. High school royalty. His family owned half the timberland around here. "Blackwood?" Jack asked. Claire looked up. "You really are from around here?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. She slid a microfilm reel into the reader and adjusted the lens. The screen flickered to life, showing a local paper dated July 5th, 1985. Jack leaned closer. Halfway down the page was a short article, barely 5 sentences. Emily Davenport, 19, was last seen leaving Whitmore Grocery on July 3rd. Authorities believe she may have left town voluntarily. Sheriff Conroy stated there were no signs of foul play. No further investigation is planned. No photo. No follow-up. Jack clenched his jaw. They buried her in ink before they even buried her body. Claire nodded. Granite Falls has always taken care of its own, and by its own, I mean the Blackwoods. "I found a badge in that box, too," Jack said. "Sheriff Conroy's. Looks like he left more than just paperwork behind." Claire sank into the chair beside the reader, her expression tight. "You need to be careful." "I'm not looking for trouble," Jack said. "But I think trouble just found me." Claire studied him. "So what now?" "I follow the trail." She turned her attention to the microfilm. "There's someone else who might know more. He tried to look into this years ago. Got run out of town for it." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Name?" "Noah Bellamy. He was a journalist, young and hungry back in the late 80s. Dug into Emily's case. Got fired. Lost everything. Lives out in the woods now. Locals think he's crazy." Jack grabbed the journal. "Where?" "Old shack off Forest Road 17, near Black Creek. He doesn't talk to people." Jack cracked a dry smile. Neither do I. Claire paused, then said, You think you're ready for what you're digging up? No, Jack said honestly, but I think it's waited long enough. He turned to leave, then stopped. That line in the journal, if anything happens to me, I did not go willingly. You believe she knew what was coming? Claire nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I think she knew exactly what they were going to do to her. Jack walked back into the wet afternoon, journal tucked under his arm, heart pounding with the weight of a story no one had dared to finish. Ranger waited patiently in the truck bed, head lifting as Jack approached. Jack opened the door and climbed in, then looked out at the fog rolling in over the trees. They erased her, he muttered, but not for long. As he started the engine and turned toward the edge of town, a black SUV slowly passed behind him. No plates, windows tinted too dark for Oregon law. Ranger growled low in his throat. Jack didn't look back. They wrote her out of history. The gravel crackled beneath Jack's tires as he turned off the main road onto Forest Route 17. A thin trail carved into the dense green of the Oregon woods, barely wide enough for his truck. Pines rose like sentinels on either side, shrouded in mist and shadow. The kind of place built for secrets. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, his ears twitching every few seconds, eyes scanning the tree line like he knew something out. There didn't want them getting closer. Jack didn't blame him. He had Emily's journal tucked into his glove box and the weight of her words pressing against his chest like a loaded sidearm. The deeper he dug, the heavier it all became. Like each page turned was pulling back another corner of the town's carefully constructed lie. Noah Bellamy had been the first and only person to raise questions about Emily's disappearance in the late 80s. According to Claire, he'd gotten shut down, silenced, shamed into exile. Rumor was he'd been living alone in a shack somewhere near Black Creek for the last 20 years. If anyone else remembered what happened back then, they weren't talking. Jack pulled the truck up to a clearing. There, barely visible through the undergrowth, was a lopsided wood frame cabin held together by rusted nails, patched tarp, and time. Smoke curled from a tin chimney. The door was open, but dark inside. Jack killed the engine. Ranger growled softly. I hear you, Jack muttered. Stay sharp. They approached slowly, boots crunching against wet needles and roots. Jack kept one hand near his hip, just in case. He stepped up onto the warped porch and knocked. Nothing. Then a voice, gravelly, like it hadn't spoken to another human in months. If you're selling salvation, I ain't buying. Jack stepped into view of the doorway. Not here to save anybody. Just looking for Noah Bellamy. A figure emerged from the dark, holding a double-barrel shotgun, cradled low but loaded. The man was thin, bearded, skin like sun-baked leather, eyes sharp, alert, sane, but just barely. That depends, he said, squinting at Jack. Who's asking? Jack Callahan. Found something on my land, something that belonged to Emily Davenport. The name landed like a dropped match. Noah blinked once, then lowered the shotgun slightly. Inside, Quick Jack followed him in. The place smelled like mildew, pine, and old paper. Every inch of wall space was covered with photos, yellowed clippings, strings, scribbled notes. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream, except Jack recognized the layout. This was investigation, the chaotic kind. Bellamy pointed to a worn chair by a battered table. Sit. Talk. Jack placed the journal down. Found it buried in a lockbox chained under an oak. Her words are inside. What she saw, what she feared. Noah opened the bag gently. His fingers trembled. I spent 5 years trying to find something like this. They destroyed everything. The cops, the newspapers. Her family was too scared to speak. Who's they? Jack asked. Noah gave a humorless smile. You already know. Blackwood. Bingo. He pulled a stained file from a drawer. Emily wasn't the first girl to go missing near Blackwood Land, but she was the last before the town shut down any real reporting. I printed this article in '88. He handed Jack a brittle newsprint page. The headline read, Sheriff Denies Cover-Up in Davenport Case. The article was short, buried on page 7. I lost my job 2 weeks later, Noah said. Editors got a call from Portland. Ad money dried up. Blackwood Timber owns half this damn county. And Sheriff Conroy, he was their guy. Always has been. Jack scanned the article, rage building under his ribs. So they wrote her out of history. Noah nodded. Exactly. Like she never mattered. Ranger barked once, low and sharp, from the porch. Jack stood, instantly alert. A second later, headlights swept across the trees outside. Noah grabbed the shotgun. You followed? He asked. I don't think so, Jack said, already moving toward the front door. A truck rumbled past on the road below, not slowing, not stopping, just passing by. Maybe. Jack watched until it disappeared, then turned back to Noah. They're nervous. That means we're close. Noah stepped back inside, eyes narrow. Then let me show you something they missed. He shuffled to a locked chest near the bed and pulled out a laminated map. It was hand-marked, scrawled with notations, X's, dates. This, Noah tapped a spot near Black Creek, is where Emily used to go with her boyfriend. Called it their spot, a weeping willow by a dry creek bed. I think that's where they did it. Whatever happened to her. It's there. Jack stared at the map. Why didn't you go yourself? Noah looked away. I did. But someone else had already been there. They'd cut the tree down, dug the place out, but I think they missed something. Jack folded the map and pocketed it. Then I'll find it. Noah looked at him long and hard. You're not like the others. I don't care about the rules, Jack replied. I care about the truth. You'll get no help from this town. I'm not asking. As Jack turned to leave, Noah added, watch your back. They don't just erase the dead. They erase the ones who ask why. Back in the truck, Ranger climbed in and curled up silently. Jack set the map between them, staring out into the dark. Weeping willow, he murmured. Dry creek bed. That's where we go next. Behind him, inside the cabin, Noah dimmed the lights and drew the blinds. He knew what was coming. So did Jack. But this time, the past didn't get to stay buried. Truth turns men into ghosts. The words Noah Bellamy had said the night before echoed in Jack's head as the truck bounced along a forest trail, barely wide enough for a vehicle. The sky hung heavy, draped in mist and low clouds, the kind of overcast that made time feel stuck. The map Noah had given him was spread across the dashboard, fluttering from the air vents, guiding Jack toward a location circled in red ink. Emily's spot. Ranger shifted restlessly in the passenger seat, tail twitching, ears high. Yeah, Jack muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. I've got that feeling too. He parked the truck near a clearing and stepped out, boots sinking into the damp underbrush. The forest was still. Too still. Even the birds seemed to know something was wrong. Ranger took the lead without needing instruction, nose low, every movement cautious. They hiked about half a mile into the woods, the trees closing in like a cathedral of shadows, until the air changed, cooler, heavier, and then they saw it. a single weeping willow. It stood like a memory, twisted and half-rotted, its leaves long gone but the draping branches still swaying as if haunted by a wind no one could feel. At its base was a patch of earth darker than the rest, sunken, disturbed. Jack approached slowly, his breath caught somewhere between rage and reverence. He ran his hand over the bark. It peeled like skin. Someone had tried to cut it once. There were axe marks, old and worn, but the tree had refused to die. Emily had come here, loved here, hid here, and maybe died here. Jack dropped to one knee and pulled a folding spade from his pack. Ranger began to growl. It was low at first, barely audible. Jack froze. His military instincts flared instantly. Back tensed, eyes scanning the perimeter. Movement from the trees. Too fast for a deer. Too quiet for a hiker. "Easy," he whispered to Ranger, but it was too late. Two shadows broke from the tree line. Jack ducked the first man's swing, some kind of pipe, and drove his shoulder into the attacker's gut, sending them both crashing to the forest floor. Ranger lunged at the second figure, teeth bared, a violent snarl erupting from his throat. The man screamed as the dog latched onto his arm. Jack punched hard, knocking his attacker off, then scrambled to his feet. The first man tried to run. Jack tackled him mid-stride and pinned him to the ground. "Who sent you?" The man didn't answer, just spat blood and twisted beneath Jack's grip. Ranger had the other man cornered against the tree, teeth inches from his face. Jack leaned close, voice low and deadly. "You came into my woods, my land. You attack me, you attack my dog. You better have a damn good reason for why you're still breathing." The man finally gasped out two words. "Blackwood says..." That's all Jack needed. He yanked the man to his feet and shoved him toward the tree line. "Tell Henry Blackwood I'm not scared of him. Tell him I don't bury things. I dig them up." The two men disappeared into the trees, bleeding and broken. Jack turned back toward the willow, chest heaving, blood roaring in his ears. His spade lay where he'd dropped it. The hole was shallow but clear now. He started digging again, this time faster, more desperate. 6 inches down, he hit something solid. He dropped to his knees and cleared the soil away with both hands. It wasn't a coffin. It was a bundle. Wrapped in black tarp, sealed with duct tape long turned gray with age. His hands trembled as he cut through it. Inside was a pile of bones. Small, fragile, human. Next to the remains lay a faded red scarf, a rusted key, and a silver locket identical to the one in the journal. But this one was broken, crushed by time or violence. Jack stared down at it. The air punched from his lungs. He didn't speak, didn't move. Not for a long time. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out the journal, holding it next to the scarf. Same handwriting, same initials inside the locket. Same everything. Emily had been here. This was where it ended, or began. A crack of a branch snapped him out of it. Not an attacker this time. Someone else. He turned, gun raised. Claire. She stepped into the clearing, soaked from the trail, chest rising fast. "Jack." He lowered the gun. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I had to know," she said. Noah called. Said you might have found something. Jack moved aside so she could see. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." "She didn't run," Jack said. "She was dumped. Forgotten. And everyone let it happen." Claire stepped closer, kneeling beside him, her voice shaking. "We have to tell someone. This is enough to open a full investigation." "They're already trying to shut us up," Jack said. "That wasn't a warning back there." "That was a threat." She looked at the bones. "Then we hit them before they hit us again." Jack nodded slowly, eyes dark with resolve. We take it to someone who still gives a damn. Someone not bought by Blackwood. Claire exhaled. You have someone in mind? Maybe. Jack stood, covered the remains back up gently, and marked the GPS coordinates in his phone. We bring this to the right hands. We blow the whole thing wide open. Ranger barked once, sharp and urgent. Jack scanned the trees again. We should move. Claire looked up at him, face pale. You're not going to stop, are you? No, Jack said. I don't stop for men like Henry Blackwood. He turned toward the trail. I stop for the dead. They're not trying to scare us. They're trying to erase us. Rain fell like sheets of static as Jack and Claire hiked back through the forest, their boots sinking into the thick, spongy moss with each step. The air was dense, choked with the kind of silence that made every creak of bark and snap of twig feel like a gunshot. Ranger moved ahead, ears flicking, body alert. He hadn't stopped scanning the tree line since they'd left the willow. Jack walked beside Claire, the GPS coordinates saved, the journal and remains sealed tight in his pack. Claire carried the crushed locket, wrapped in a bandana and clutched tight like a relic she wasn't ready to let go of. Do you think that was her? Claire asked suddenly, voice low but urgent. That those bones... Jack didn't look at her. Yeah, it was her. Claire swallowed hard. I knew her name, you know? I heard my grandma talk about her like a story, but seeing that... She wasn't a story, Jack said. She was a girl. And someone made sure nobody remembered that. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the drumbeat of rain on leaves. Then Ranger stopped cold. Jack halted instantly. Claire did too. What is it? Ranger's stance shifted, back legs stiff, ears locked, tail still. A soft growl built low in his throat. Jack motioned to Claire. Get behind me! From the trees ahead came a voice. Jack Callahan. Always knew you'd make trouble. 3 men stepped out from the shadows, dressed in hunting gear too clean for real use. One held a rifle, another carried a bat. The third, tall, heavy, with cold blue eyes, was empty-handed, but he didn't need a weapon. His presence was threat enough. Henry Blackwood sends his regards, the tall man said. Jack's fists clenched. Let me guess. You're not here to talk. No one's talking, the man said. No one's hearing anything either. You go digging up graves that don't belong to you. You pay the price. Ranger barked, snarling. Claire stepped closer, whispering, We can't outrun them. We don't have to outrun them, Jack replied. We just have to survive the next 30 seconds. Then everything exploded. The man with the bat lunged. Jack ducked the first swing, rammed his shoulder into the man's gut, and sent him flying into a tree trunk. Ranger leapt at the man with the rifle, teeth sinking into his wrist before the barrel could rise. The gun went off. Loud, wild, useless. Claire screamed, dropping to the ground. The tall man moved in fast, fists up. Jack met him head-on. They traded blows in the mud, punches thudding against flesh. Jack caught one to the ribs, another to the jaw, then drove his knee into the man's side and shoved him back with a roar. You think this is going to stop me? Jack growled. The man spit blood. You think this is all we've got? Jack pulled his pistol. No, I think it's all you've got left. He didn't fire. He didn't have to. The 3 men stumbled away, one bleeding from the hand, one limping, the tall one holding his ribs. This isn't over, the leader spat. No, Jack said. It's just beginning. The men disappeared into the woods, swallowed by shadow and rain. Claire stood, mud on her knees, face pale. They weren't trying to scare us. Jack looked at her. She finished the thought herself. They were trying to erase us. He nodded. They moved fast now, running the last quarter-mile to the truck. When they reached the clearing, Jack's stomach sank. His tires were slashed. All four. "Damn it," he muttered, scanning the tree line. No one. Just the rain. But the message was clear. Claire shivered. What now? Jack looked back the way they'd come, then at the evidence in his hands. "We get off this mountain!" One way or another, they loaded the remains, the locket, and the journal into waterproof containers. Jack shouldered his rifle. "We'll take the ridge trail. It leads to the old ranger station. There's a satellite phone and backup generator." 10 miles, Claire stared at him. "We're walking 10 miles through this storm?" Jack looked her in the eye. "You still want the truth?" She didn't hesitate. "I do." "Then we walk." They set out, Ranger leading the way, the rain turning to sleet, the trail ahead already slick and fading. Jack kept one hand on the weapon strapped across his chest and the other on the truth he now carried like a curse. Somewhere behind them, buried in those woods, was the memory of a girl everyone had tried to forget. And somewhere ahead, someone still wanted to keep it that way. They hiked in silence, lungs burning, bodies soaked, boots slipping in the mud. At dusk, the forest began to open into higher terrain, rockier, colder, the wind now cutting like a blade. Claire stumbled once. Jack caught her. "You good?" She nodded, teeth chattering. "I'm fine." They crested the ridge just as the clouds broke, revealing a faint outline of the old ranger station below. It stood like a beacon, dark, battered, but still there. Jack pointed. "We make it there. We send everything we've got. Photos, GPS, evidence. We go loud." Claire looked down at the building. "And what happens when the Blackwoods find out?" "They'll come hard," Jack said. "But this time we'll be ready." Ranger growled softly. Jack looked down the slope, heart pounding. "We've got one shot to crack this open," he said. "And we're not going down quiet." They started the descent, unaware that a figure was already watching from the shadows near the station, eyes fixed on the trail, radio in hand. Justice has a price, and someone always pays it. The ranger station came into view through the fog like a ghost. Weathered wood, windows boarded, antenna rusted but intact. Jack squinted through the rain-slicked trees, scanning for movement. He didn't like how quiet it was. Even the wind felt like it was waiting for something. Claire stood beside him, shivering beneath her soaked jacket, face drawn and pale but locked in. She'd made it 10 miles on foot through hell and hadn't flinched. That counted. Jack crouched and pointed. "We go in quiet. Check the perimeter, then get that sat phone working." Claire nodded. Ranger stayed low, moving in a wide arc around the station as Jack led the way to the door. The place had been abandoned for years, but it didn't feel empty. He paused at the steps, motioned Claire to stay back, then pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned. Inside, it smelled of mold, ash, and old pine. Dust hung in the air like memory. The station had one main room with a wood stove, a broken cot, and a desk with filing drawers. In the corner stood a steel cabinet with the emergency sat phone and solar battery hookup. The unit blinked green, still alive. Jack let out a slow breath. "We're in luck." Claire stepped in behind him, dripping water onto the floor. "Feels like a trap." Jack nodded. "Maybe. But it's our only shot." He moved to the cabinet and opened it. The phone was there, dusty but intact. He powered it up and waited. Bars, a blinking cursor, then a signal. Claire stared over his shoulder. "Now what?" "We send everything." Jack said, pulling the GPS file, photos of the remains, locket, journal scans, all of it, and compressed them into a folder. He typed fast, hands flying over the keys. 2. Oregon Investigations at protonmail.com. CC. 3 investigative journalists he'd trusted in another life. Subject: unreported homicide, urgent attachment, Emily Davenport evidence.zip. He hit send. The screen flickered. Message sent. Jack leaned back, exhaling hard. It's done. Claire smiled faintly. Then we made it. A crack sounded outside. Not thunder. Jack was moving before he knew it, diving for the light switch and killing power. The room plunged into dim gray. Claire ducked behind the desk, Ranger barking violently near the back wall. Another crack. Closer. Window glass shattered above them. Jack grabbed his rifle. We've got company. He crawled low to the window, peeking out. Figures in the trees, 3, maybe 4, armed, closing in fast. He turned to Claire. Emergency hatch in the floor. You go first. Ranger after you. What about you? I hold them off. Get to the creek, loop back to the cabin, wait for me. She hesitated, eyes locked with his. Claire. Go. She nodded and pried up the hatch beneath the rug. It groaned, then swung open. Cold earth and darkness stared back. Ranger dropped down first, silent and fast. Claire followed, disappearing into the dark. Jack pulled 2 flashbangs from his pack and yanked the pins. Come and get me, you sons of bitches. He threw one left, one right. Boom. Boom. The explosions rocked the forest, sending birds screaming from trees. Jack dove out the window and rolled, rifle raised. He caught one of the attackers mid-step, center mass. The man dropped. Gunfire sparked from the tree line. Jack ran low, weaving between trees, drawing fire away from Claire's route. He caught another figure in the corner of his scope and fired. Another drop. A bullet ripped through his shoulder. He spun sideways, slammed into a tree, pain flaring like white fire. He bit down on a scream, stumbled behind cover. Blood ran down his sleeve. They were getting closer. He raised his rifle again, breathing ragged, vision blurring. But before he could squeeze the trigger, headlights cut through the trees. An engine roared. Tires tore through the mud. A black pickup smashed through the tree line and fishtailed to a stop. Door swung open. Claire. She doubled back. Ranger barked from the passenger seat, snarling. Jack, get in! He didn't think. He just moved. She dragged him into the cab, hit the gas, and spun the truck out of the woods, gravel flying. Gunfire chased them for a few seconds, then fell silent. They didn't stop for miles. Jack slumped in the passenger seat, pressing a towel to his shoulder, sweat pouring down his face. You came back, he said. Claire glanced at him. You expected me not to? No, but I hoped you'd run. I did. Right back to get you. He smiled weakly. They hit the highway, headlights blazing. Did the files send? She asked. Jack nodded. All of it. Claire tightened her grip on the wheel. Then we made noise. Yeah, Jack whispered. But noise means war. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, Justice has a price, and someone always pays it. Jack looked at her. We're paying it now. Claire shook her head. Not yet. But when they find out what we sent, the storm's coming. Jack closed his eyes and braced for it. They're not covering their tracks anymore. They're burning the whole road down. Morning broke with a sky the color of a bruised promise. Jack sat in the back seat of Claire's truck, his shoulder wrapped tight, pain pulsing behind his eyes. Ranger rested against his leg, unmoving but alert, his silence more telling than any growl. The radio crackled to life. A woman's voice, public and sharp. Allegations of a cover-up in Granite Falls involving the disappearance of Emily Davenport. New evidence, reportedly recovered by a local war veteran, is now in the hands of state authorities and independent media. Jack leaned forward, his breath catching. "They heard it," he said. "They actually heard it." Claire, gripping the wheel, nodded. Her knuckles were white. But so did everyone else. They drove past the welcome sign into Granite Falls. Something was different. Off. The town wasn't just quiet. It was tense. Faces peered from windows, conversations paused on porches, the calm before the explosion. "They know we went loud," Jack muttered. Claire pulled into the library's back lot. "I haven't been home in 2 days. I need to check in." "You?" "I need to find Noah." Claire froze. He hasn't answered his phone since last night. Jack felt it immediately, that gut-tightening sense he'd learned to trust. "We need to go." Now they drove north through back roads, passing trucks that slowed when they saw Jack's face. Word was out. The town was watching. They reached Noah's cabin by mid-morning. But something was wrong. The front door was wide open. A curtain flapped out the window like a signal. Jack got out. Slow. "Stay behind me." Ranger was already growling, low and sharp. They stepped into the cabin. Ransacked. Papers torn from walls, pinned strings snapped, photos shredded and burned in the stove. The map Noah had shown them was missing. So was the journal copy Jack had given him as backup. "Noah?" Jack called out. No answer. Claire moved to the back, checked the single bedroom. "He's not here." Jack scanned the room. Not just a burglary, a purge. "They didn't search. They erased," he said, voice like gravel. Claire picked up a broken photo frame. Noah with a young woman, possibly his daughter. The glass was cracked straight through both their faces. Jack knelt beside the hearth, ash and paper remnants. He pulled one out with tweezers, still legible. "If I disappear, it wasn't by choice." "Son of a bitch," Jack muttered. He stood fast. "We have to assume they got to him." Maybe worse, Claire's face hardened. "We should go to the police." Jack looked her dead in the eye. "Which ones?" "Sheriff Riley's station hasn't made a single public comment since this started. That's not fear. That's compliance." Claire didn't argue. Jack's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "Back off. Or next time we finish the job, no signature, no location, just a threat." He showed it to Claire. "They're not covering their tracks anymore," she whispered. Jack nodded. "They're burning the whole road down." He turned to Ranger. "Let's move." They got back in the truck, tension bleeding into silence. On the drive back, they passed a car fire near the outskirts, smoke curling high into the sky. A burnt-out sedan, no police tape, no responders, just smoldering remains and the smell of gasoline. Jack slowed the truck. Claire got out, pulled the license plate from the dirt. Her voice cracked. "It's Noah's." Jack got out too, the heat from the car licking at his face. Inside the shell of the vehicle, beneath the warped frame, something shimmered. A silver dog tag. Not Noah's. Emily's. Jack reached through the shattered window, ignoring the burn of the metal, and retrieved it. Claire whispered, "Why leave this?" Jack stared at it. A message. Claire looked at him, eyes wide. What kind of message? That they're still writing the end of her story, and they think they get the last word. Claire swallowed hard. "Then we write louder." Jack pocketed the dog tag, then glanced around. His gaze locked on a nearby ridge, one Claire recognized. "What?" she asked. Ranger found something up there a week ago. An old chain in the ground. I dug near it, but never finished. Claire's breath hitched. You think there's more? I think Emily didn't just leave behind a journal, Jack said. I think she left breadcrumbs. The fire crackled behind them. Smoke curled into the morning sky like a warning. We go back, Jack said. Tonight. Before they torched that place too, Claire hesitated. What if it's another trap? Jack looked at her, eyes cold. Then we spring it our way. They didn't just bury her body. They buried the truth in someone's hands. The rain had finally stopped by the time Jack and Claire reached the edge of the property. The forest was damp and hushed, the kind of silence that felt earned after chaos. Mist clung to the trees like gauze. Ranger stood at attention near the old oak, his nose to the earth where the chain had first been discovered. Jack adjusted the strap on his shoulder. Pain from the gunshot still a dull roar under his skin, but he pushed it down. This was where it started, and maybe where it needed to end. Claire dropped her bag beside the tree. We dig again? No, Jack said. We finish. He stepped forward and knelt beside the earth. The spot was still slightly uneven, the dirt looser than the surrounding ground, but he'd never gone deep enough the first time. Just the lockbox with the journal and badge. But Emily had wanted to be found. Jack could feel it now. Every piece she left behind had been deliberate. Ranger pawed at a second patch of soil, a few feet from the first. Jack took the hint and began to dig. The blade of the spade struck something hard, just 6 inches down. He brushed the dirt away, revealing a sealed metal tube about 2 feet long. Faded letters were etched into the side. To whoever refuses to forget. Claire stepped closer, kneeling beside him. She left more. Jack nodded and cracked the seal open. Inside was a stack of papers in a waterproof sleeve, wrapped tight around an old cassette tape and a photograph. He unfolded the papers carefully. Emily's handwriting. If this is in your hands, then I was right. He wouldn't let me go. And someone helped him. Jack scanned the rest, his jaw tightening. Emily hadn't just documented her fear. She'd recorded names, locations, conversations, but one name stood out like a burn across the page. Ruth Whitmore. Claire recoiled. That's my grandmother. Jack looked up, the words slow and heavy. Emily said Ruth helped cover it up. Said she convinced Emily to keep quiet, told her it was just a mistake, told her if she made a scene, things would get worse. Claire shook her head violently. No, my grandma loved Emily. She used to tell me stories. She cried when she talked about her. She also stayed here her whole life, Jack said, voice even. Safe, respected. Nobody ever questioned her. Claire's lips trembled. She never said anything about this. Never mentioned Henry Blackwood. She didn't need to, Jack said. She made sure nobody dug too deep. Not even you. Claire backed away, her face pale. I don't believe it. Jack held up the photograph from the tube. 2 girls, Emily and Claire's grandmother, smiling in the sun. And behind them, Sheriff Conroy and Henry Blackwood. Claire took the photo and stared. They were all there, Jack said. She was in it from the start. Claire dropped the photo like it burned. Ranger barked suddenly, alerting. Jack turned toward the trees. Footsteps, someone approaching. Claire whispered, "It's her." From the shadows, Ruth Whitmore stepped into the clearing. She was older now, gray hair tucked beneath a rain hat, a heavy shawl wrapped around her shoulders. But her eyes were sharp, too sharp. Jack stood slowly. Been watching us? She nodded, calm. I knew you'd come back. I warned Claire once not to chase ghosts. She didn't listen. Claire stared at her, hollow. Is it true? Ruth didn't flinch. Yes. The word hit harder than any lie would have. Claire's breath caught. Why? Ruth's voice cracked, but only slightly. Because I was trying to save her. Emily was in love with the wrong person. Henry was dangerous, yes. But more than that, he was untouchable. If she'd spoken out, he would have killed her. Faster, meaner. I thought I could stall it. Protect her long enough to get her out. But she died anyway, Jack said coldly. Ruth nodded. And I've carried that every damn day of my life. Claire stepped forward. You could have told someone. I tried, Ruth said. I went to Conroy. I begged him to help her. He laughed, said she'd outlived her usefulness. That's when I knew. Jack's voice was sharp. So you helped bury her? I helped delay it. I slipped her the key to that box. I told her where to hide it. I gave her a chance to leave evidence. I couldn't stop the machine, Jack. But I could jam the gears. Jack looked down at the tape. What's on this? Ruth hesitated. A recording. Emily's last one. She made it the night she disappeared. I helped her hide it in the tube before Henry came looking. Claire stepped between them. You're going to testify. Ruth shook her head. I'm not long for this world, child. But I'll tell the truth now. On record, Jack studied her. Then come with us. Ruth looked toward the horizon. You still have no idea how far this goes. Jack turned toward Claire. We get her to the state office. We give them everything. Including her confession, Claire nodded. But before they could move, another voice cut through the silence. You're not going anywhere. 3 figures emerged from the woods, rifles drawn. One of them, clearly a Blackwood man, stepped forward, grin wide. You dug too deep, Callahan. Jack raised his hands slowly. Claire stepped in front of her grandmother. Ranger growled low, ready to tear flesh. The man smiled wider. Let's finish this. You want justice? You have to rip it out of the devil's hands. Jack stood between the rifle barrels and the women behind him. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, like a whisper before a scream. The 3 armed men, dressed in flannel and camo, moved into a triangle around them. The one in front, lean, sharp-eyed, with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, had his sights set squarely on Jack. End of the road, Callahan, he said. You've stirred enough shit. Ranger's growl rumbled low and lethal. Jack kept his hands just slightly raised, eyes calculating. If you're going to kill me, at least do it like a man. Don't hide behind a dead girl's silence. The man sneered. This isn't about Emily. It's about you not knowing when to stop. You think this ends with me? Jack said. The story's already out. Journalists have the evidence. Audio, photos, her bones. You shoot me and your face is the next one on every news site in America. Behind him, Ruth's voice cut in, sharp and cold. He's right. You boys shoot a veteran, a librarian, and an old woman all in one afternoon? That's not just murder. That's a massacre. You'll bury this town in blood. The leader hesitated, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Then, from the woods behind them, movement. A gunshot cracked. One of the men dropped with a scream, blood spraying from his leg. The others turned fast, weapons raised. But it was too late. Claire had moved behind the oak while they talked, circling wide, keeping low. Now she stepped out, rifle braced in both hands, aimed steady. Drop your weapons, she ordered, voice shaking but steady. The 2 remaining men froze. Now, Jack barked. They dropped them. Ranger lunged forward and tackled the snake-necked one. pinning him in the mud with a savage snarl at his throat. Jack moved quickly, picking up one of the rifles and training it on the man. "You tell Blackwood we're coming. Not crawling. Marching." The man coughed, blood on his lips. "You think this ends with Henry?" "No," Jack said. "It ends with the truth." They tied the men up with cord from Jack's bag, left them near a tree marked with trail tape, and hiked back toward the truck. Ruth limped beside them, her breathing shallow but her eyes clear. "I can't run much farther," she said. "You two go. I'll hold the story from here." "You're coming," Jack said. "You're the missing piece." She looked at him, tired but proud. "You've already got everything you need." Claire pulled Jack aside as Ruth rested. "There's something you don't know." "What?" "That tape?" she said, pulling it from her jacket. "I played part of it." Jack's jaw tightened. "And?" "Emily didn't just name names. She begged someone to help her escape." He paused. "Who?" Claire looked away. Jack stepped in front of her. "Who, Claire?" She swallowed. "Sheriff Conroy didn't act alone." "He took orders," Jack stared. Then Claire said it. "Henry Blackwood didn't just cover up Emily's death. He ordered it." Jack didn't speak, didn't breathe. The pieces clicked together like a lock turning. The silence after the fire, the threats, the way the town bent to his will. Claire whispered, "You want justice? You have to rip it out of the devil's hands." Jack nodded once. They loaded back into the truck and sped toward Granite Falls, the road slick and shining under the rain. Lights began to appear ahead, the edge of town. They pulled into a gas station lot, hiding behind the propane tanks. Jack called one of his contacts from the satellite phone. "Package sent," he said. "I'm going to walk into the lion's den now." "Jack," the voice on the line warned, "you don't have backup. You're not wearing a badge anymore." "I've got something better," Jack said. "The truth." He hung up. Claire looked at him. "You're going to Blackwood's estate." "Yes." "And if he tries to kill you?" Jack opened the glove box and pulled out a small recorder. "Then I let the whole world hear him do it." Claire stared at him. "You really think he'll confess?" Jack looked out toward the Blackwood estate, its white roof peeking above the hills like a throne built on bones. "He's not used to being challenged," he said. "He'll want to gloat." Claire exhaled, her hands trembling. "You're walking into a trap." "Maybe," Jack said, "but I'm dragging him out of the dark." He climbed out of the truck. Claire grabbed his wrist. "If you die—" "I won't," he said, with a calm she didn't understand. "I already did once. This is just what I came back for." He walked off into the dark, toward the house where it all started. You don't kill the past by burying it. You feed it until it eats you alive. Jack walked up the gravel drive of the Blackwood estate, boots soaked, rifle slung low, eyes locked on the colonial mansion glowing at the top of the hill like it was lit from inside by hell itself. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was thick with static, like the storm was holding its breath. He passed the old iron gate wide open, welcoming, like they'd been expecting him. He didn't like that, but he kept walking. Two men in dark suits waited at the front door. Both carried visible sidearms. One nodded silently, opened the door without a word. Inside, the house was cold, expensive, marble floor, crystal chandelier. But something about it felt hollow, like the money had bled all the warmth out long ago. They led Jack down a hallway lined with portraits of dead men in suits, generations of Blackwoods watching. The den was dim, lit only by a fire that seemed to burn too bright. Jack stepped in. Henry Blackwood sat in a leather chair, glass of bourbon in hand, smile slow and poisonous. "I was wondering when you'd stop sniffing around like a dog," he said. "Come in, Jack. Warm yourself. No need to play soldier in my house." Jack didn't move. "You know why I'm here?" "Oh, I know exactly why," Blackwood said, swirling his drink. "Because people like you always come running when they hear a ghost scream. You want the truth, justice, retribution. Noble words from a man who's already got blood on his boots." "I'm not here to talk," Jack said. "I'm here to end this," Blackwood chuckled. "And what? A memory? A rumor?" Emily Davenport was a troubled girl who ran from home. People forget her name. That's how life works. Jack pulled the cassette recorder from his pocket and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the room, shaking, afraid, real. "If you find this, he's the one. Henry Blackwood. He said no one would believe me. Said I was just a mistake. I think he's going to kill me." Silence fell. Blackwood's smile didn't fade, but something behind his eyes darkened. "Where did you find that?" he asked. Jack said nothing. Blackwood stood, slowly. "Do you know how many men I've had killed over less? Do you know how many cops still cash checks with my name in the corner?" Jack's voice was steel. "They're cashing their last one. You think the world cares about some dead girl?" Blackwood stepped forward, suddenly furious. "You think it cares about truth? Justice? That was a fantasy they sold you in uniform." Jack didn't flinch. "Maybe. But I'm still buying." Blackwood stared at him, firelight dancing in his glass. "You don't understand what's coming. You opened a door that's been locked for decades." "No," Jack said. "I dug it up." He pulled out a flash drive and held it up. "I sent this to the press. Your face will be on every screen by morning. You're bluffing." Jack smiled. "That's what they always think." Blackwood took a step forward. "You think you're the first to try and take me down?" he hissed. "You don't kill the past by burying it. You feed it until it eats you alive." Jack's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what you've been doing." He opened his jacket slowly, revealing a hidden mic. "This entire conversation's been recorded. Live-streamed, in fact. Congratulations, Henry. You finally made the front page." Blackwood's eyes flared. "You little bastard!" The guards burst in. One raised a pistol. Jack moved first, grabbing the glass decanter on the table and hurling it at the man's face. It shattered on impact, giving Jack just enough time to dive behind the armchair. Gunfire ripped through the den. Books exploded off the shelf. A bullet tore through the leather where Jack had just been. Smoke filled the room. The fire roared higher. Jack returned fire, dropped one of the guards. Ranger would have torn him in half, but Jack had left him behind with Claire. It was just him now. He ducked low, rolled to the side, and saw Blackwood trying to slip out a side door. "Oh, no, you don't!" Jack lunged, slammed into him, driving both of them into the wall. The flash drive clattered to the floor. They wrestled, Blackwood surprisingly strong for his age, but Jack had fury on his side. He pinned the man to the wall, fist raised. "Say her name," Jack growled. "Say it." Blackwood spat blood, defiant. Jack slammed him again. "Say it." Finally, barely audible, he hissed, "Emily." Jack let him fall. The fire crackled behind them. Smoke rose to the ceiling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Claire had called them. He knew it in his gut. Jack picked up the flash drive, the recorder, and walked back to the front door. He didn't look back. Outside, headlights cut through the mist. Claire's truck, Ranger barking inside. She stepped out as he limped toward her. "You're bleeding." "Again," Jack said. "Did he confess?" Jack looked at her. "Yes, and this time, the whole world heard it." Sunlight cut through the gray for the first time in days, streaking over the ridges of Granite Falls like someone had finally pulled the curtain back on a stage that had hidden too much for too long. Jack sat on the cabin steps, shoulders still stiff, bandages clean now. The forest was quiet. No gunfire, no threats, no ghosts whispering from beneath the soil. Just wind through the trees and the occasional bark from Ranger, who was busy chasing squirrels like the world hadn't shifted beneath his paws. Claire came down the gravel path with 2 mugs of coffee, steam rising from both. "They indicted him," she said, handing Jack his. "Henry Blackwood, conspiracy, obstruction, murder." Jack took a sip. "They'll drag it out." "Sure," she nodded. "But it started. He's not untouchable anymore." He looked out toward the edge of the property, where the old chain had first been found, where Emily had left her story, hoping someone would listen one day. "Did you ever think it'd get this far?" Claire asked, easing down beside him. "I thought I'd dig up a story and go back to being quiet," he said. "I didn't think it would crack the whole damn town open." She watched him for a long moment. But that's what had to happen, right? For people to see. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. A locket, worn and tarnished, but whole. He opened it. Inside, the tiny photo of a girl with fire in her eyes and grief on her shoulders. Emily Davenport. Jack stared at it. "She was a kid," he said. "That's what keeps hitting me. Everyone kept saying she was trouble, like she deserved what happened, because she didn't fit in the box they wanted her in." "She was in love," Claire said. "That was her crime." Jack nodded. Claire leaned against his side. "You gave her a voice again. You didn't let them erase her. I didn't do it alone." Silence settled between them for a while, peaceful this time. Across town, reporters lined the courthouse steps. Drones buzzed overhead, capturing the face of a man who'd spent his life pulling strings in the shadows. Henry Blackwood didn't look powerful anymore. He looked old, tired, exposed. Behind him, others had already started to fall. Sheriff Conroy had resigned. 2 deputies turned state's witness. The DA's office reopened the files on 3 other cold cases, all of them connected to the Blackwood name. Granite Falls wasn't healed, but it was bleeding clean now. Claire turned to Jack. "What are you going to do next?" He shrugged. "Hadn't decided." "This place still feels heavy," she smirked. "You've been saying that since the second day you got here." "I mean it this time." He sipped his coffee, then added, "But maybe the point isn't to leave the weight behind. Maybe it's to carry it better." Claire tilted her head. "You thinking about staying?" He looked out at the woods. "I think someone needs to keep telling the stories," he said. "The real ones. Not the ones we invent to sleep better at night." She smiled. "Granite Falls Gazette has an opening." Jack chuckled. "You offering me a desk job?" "Desk, chair, bulletproof vest. Come standard now." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that cracks through old pain. Then Claire sobered. "My grandmother's testimony goes public next week," she said. "She wants to speak herself. No press conference, just a town hall. She said she wants to look people in the eye." Jack nodded. "She's brave." "She's guilty," Claire corrected. "But she's trying to do right." "That matters," Jack agreed. "It does." He pulled the recorder from his jacket one last time and placed it on the step beside him. A symbol now. not a weapon. You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found that chain? Claire asked. Jack didn't have to think about it. She'd still be buried in silence. And the next Emily? No one would have listened to her either. Claire looked at him, eyes misty. She finally got her story told. Jack nodded slowly. Yeah, he said, and now it belongs to everyone. They sat there, sun climbing higher, Ranger curling at their feet. For once, nothing chased them. Nothing needed to be run from. Just the wind, the trees, the truth. The story of Emily Davenport spread far beyond Granite Falls. It sparked investigations into old power structures in small towns across the country. Her name became something people whispered in courtrooms, wrote in columns, held up at vigils. A reminder that some truths don't stay buried, and that justice doesn't come when it's convenient. It comes when someone refuses to stop digging. Jack stayed, rebuilt the cabin, rejoined the world on his own terms. He didn't become a hero. He didn't want that. He just wanted the next voice to not have to scream so loud to be heard. Because in the end, the message was simple. Every life matters, even the ones we try hardest to forget. And some stories, once unearthed, never go quiet again.